everyone. Hope you're enjoying your Wednesday afternoon. It is very pretty here in Northwest Ohio, so I think some grass is getting cut at my house this afternoon. That's my guess. I want to talk to you about, as these new releases come out, these new tools come out. I appreciate all you guys joining because there's a lot of ways to get this information. You can read the README files. You can look at all of those different things. What I always try to do is bring my perception of the value of different tools and where some things stand out. So some of these I'll highlight more than others. I rarely ever mention every single new thing that came along. We used to do a lot of update classes, from one release of AutoCAD to the other about 10, 15,000 years ago, whenever that was. And we would go through and, you'd look at it and it's like, oh, the text changed. The text box looks this much different or whatever. And while it is new, it's not something that really changes how you're going to work with the software. So I want to point out some things that either make your life simpler or just really stood out to me as a tool I've been kind of waiting on and hoping that would come in. All right, let's get my PowerPoint going here. So just a little bit about who we are. I'm sure most of you are probably very aware of Imaginet, but we are part of Revit Worldwide. What we focus on is Autodesk tools as well as Archibus, and then we've got like a Geosystem Solutions, and a big part of what I do is those professional services, and then we also have training that's part of that. RAN 3D does similar things to what we're describing, but focuses on Dassault software and Dassault PTC training. And when it comes to training, if you've taken a training class with us or any other reseller over the past, probably 20 years, you've probably used an Ascent book to do it. And Ascent is another wing of our company that writes those books, and it's really a key in bringing that knowledge down to a user level. I makes me very happy that Ascent is indeed part of our company because we get to proofread books before they come out to the general public, and we also get to have some input on that as well. We're spread across North America. This is a slide I always say, here's our offices across North America. We probably could have about 500 dots on there now, so many of us are working from home. So I guess we've got a lot more offices as everybody sits not in an office, but an individual space, typically at home. This is what mine looks like right now. It's my kitchen table. At one point, we were all setting up and getting some stuff done. I've got a high school junior, a high school freshman, and a first grader who are all doing distance learning from home. My wife is she's teaching her second grade class from our kitchen table. And of course, I'm doing this. So right now, I am not at the kitchen table. I am hiding in a secret location so that I don't hear the dog bark or any video game noises while we go through and do this presentation. I have been with Imaginet for about 19 years, coming up on 20 here real quick, and I'm almost entirely on manufacturing software and data management, which is lucky for you because that's what we're going to talk about here in a minute with the Inventor and Vault. So with Inventor, looking at what's new, these are kind of the key areas that they broke out these different features in. And these, to me, have differing levels of weight. Yes, these are definitely the areas that are here, but we'll talk through how some of them are weighted a little bit differently. I'll tell you right now, the drawing automation, I think, is pretty hot. I think that's a big deal. AnyCAD for Revit is something quite a few of us have been waiting for a while. Really depends where you're at and what you're doing. And the frame generator, frame generator. That they've just been getting better and better at that. It's come out, I don't know how long ago now, probably 10 years, and they've just improved that all along the way. So the first one I want to take a look at is just the Inventor experience that you get into, how we actually work with the software. And we have this idea of a dark mode now. And the software has moved to this instead of having that really bright screen in front of you. My presentation today is not in a dark mode. Obviously, it's very bright. And that's kind of where I came from with software. It all looked like that. But now we're moving to these dark modes where we've got it where it now has that same look and feel, but it's got this dark sense to it. And while this is great, I actually like this. I tend to work in lower light conditions, so not having that screen just shining at me with that bright blue light coming off of it. I like the idea of the dark mode. It's almost dark mode though. So this is cool, it's easy to switch, and I can show you in a minute where that's at. It's an easy switch to that, but not all iLogics are affected by it. My home screen, file selection boxes, projects, I think like some Vault stuff. When you hit one of those, it becomes very clear that this is an ongoing process. Most of it's dark mode. I heard someone refer to it as a partial eclipse mode because it's getting close, right? You know, they will still have certain things. If you're not careful, you will need sunglasses. If you're in a very dark room, you're working along and you go to open a file, it will be very bright. So dark mode is cool, and it's almost dark mode. We're getting there. The user interface continues to change, and this is something we have seen change, update, and just generally speaking, has just changed quite a bit since we've gone into this. Where in the past, we saw started with the whole command, went to a property dialog box. And we saw the extrude and revolve move to a property dialog box. Now we're seeing a lot of other tools begin to move to this properties dialog box. And for me, I know when AutoCAD switched, for example, to the ribbon from the standard toolbars, it was a hard move. And I was fine with it, but I get that. You're used to something and it switches. This doesn't feel like that to me. These properties, this just makes sense how this works. Instead of having this, the dialogue that's in your face, these appear when we need them, they go away. So personally, I like it. I'm glad we're moving toward that. So all of these are in here. The couple that, another couple, I think decal is going to be one of them. And there's one other that I can't recall right now that's been added to this. So this is almost all of the geometry creation tools that we're typically used to working with have now been used to a property palette set. And that's one of the big things Autodesk is focusing on right now in terms of the interface and moving it to this modern UI experience and changing that user experience so it's much more intuitive, much more heads up, and we can just work kind of in a straightforward manner as we're working on that. So with part modeling, there's just a couple of things that stood out about part modeling, and they're enhancements to tools that are already there. So this is, again, I like to talk about the things that really have weight for me, and this one doesn't quite as much. But now the unwrap command, this came about last year, we saw some of that. Now we can select multiple holes to be rigid. Before we could select a hole, now we can select multiple holes so that it's going to lock it down, and it changes the way that the unwrap feature reacts. You can also now rename the unwrap feature. So it's just an extension of some of the tools we had before. With sheet metal, if I have a plane that's in an angle, I can set my angle by choosing a particular plane. So before we had to put in 60 degrees, 46 degrees. Now we can have that driven by a angled plane, and it will change and update with the angled plane. So just, again, it's an addition to what we've seen before. It's not, to me, that's, cool, great, some new features that we have as part of that, but that's not something that jumps out at me. One other thing, and I didn't really kind of include it on my slide, but I was kind of playing with it. You can select features by windowing. Before, we could only do it via actually clicking and holding control and clicking multiple features. We can select features via windowing now. So part modeling, it's getting pretty mature. There's always a few things I would like to see. Last time we saw the solid sweep, which was a cool addition. I'd like to see some things happen with sheet metal, working on that, some changes. But overall, it's getting to the point where the part modeling side of Inventor has become really robust and really mature. So we're not seeing as much change, additions, updates to that. Assembly modeling, whenever I think of assembly modeling and I think, what do I like to see in assembly modeling? It'd be interesting, I like they added joints. There's some things that I'd like to see with constraints. I'd love to update constraints a little bit and do some things, but I don't really have an idea how. And then something comes along like this where I'm like, man, I didn't even know I needed that. But the file naming enhancements that we have that started with frame generator, we're now seeing it with mirror and copy, where I can specify in Inventor how I want a file to be named when it's mirrored or copied, or more importantly, and I'll show in just a minute with tube and pipe, I can call out every single part of that. And this becomes so important when we do move to a vaulted system. When we're using another tool to handle that data for us, it's really important that we have those names the way that we want them to be, following our format. And Inventor 2021, they've really updated that to where I can create a file naming scheme for these components within Inventor that is going to follow what I'm looking for to do and make sure that I have a unique information for each one of those. We can have index numbers come in. We can have it in a lot of different ways. So we've seen it before with frame generator. We now have it with tube and pipe and mirror and copy. So that I like a lot. Along these lines, this is again something that I don't know if I knew I needed, but now I'm so glad it's there, is when you save a file, and everybody who's worked with Inventor has seen this. You go to save a file and it says, hey, I need to update, you're saving in assembly, I need to update these 3 other files as well. And you're staring at it, you're going, I swear I didn't change those. Why is it looking to update? Why is it trying to save those files? Well, now in the dialog box, it will give you information about why it's trying to save those files. And this is something I was just playing with yesterday, where I had files, I had not checked them out from Vault. I had opened them, said, don't check them out. I was just kind of trying to break it, And when I went to save it, it said, look, these files need to be saved. However, they are not checked out from Vault. And then it lists the reasons it wants to save them. They were in older format, the user edits, and then it says API changes, and I'm not 100% sure what that means, whether it was API calls to them, that one, and there's another one it will list called implicit update. And if implicit update, it'll just, I'm not sure what that means. It just implicitly updated, I guess. But migration, I love the fact that it'll tell me I need to save this file because it needs to migrate forward. I need to save this file because there were user edits. I need to save this file because a file resolution changed, right? We were pointing here, now we're pointing there. So this level of information is something I know that personally stands out to me. I always want to know, like, why is this not saving? Why is it wanting to save it? Where's it at? And now within the file dialog box, it gives us that level of information. If we're saving multiple files, why it wants to save those multiple files. Nothing you really need to do to make this happen. This is just part and parcel of it, and you'll really see it when it comes to assemblies. We don't see this so much when we're working with other things. It's with assemblies that it stands out. You do have more control as well over whether files get saved or not. There's an option where I can save for, I can tell it to prompt me to save for migration. I thought I grabbed that in here. So yeah, this is the old options. I'm sorry, this is the old options that we have. There's a new set of options within here where it'll prompt me to save on these different things. And one of the options I have is I can say save files that are in library folders. If I uncheck that, files in the library paths don't get saved in the dialog box and they will not save them. It's basically, oh, it's in a library folder, I'm not going to change it as a result of this. So I know I've had lots of people work with that when they migrate forward and suddenly it's trying to save a file that's in an old library folder because it got migrated forward. Now we have an option where we can just ignore that and we're not going to save those files and doesn't even worry about them. So a lot of control in that area. And that to me stands out because as a user, that's one of the most frustrating things when we're saving this large assembly and these 50 files, something changed and I don't know what, and this one wants to save. Now we have newer options where we can go in and determine whether or not how we want to work with that and what we want the default condition for those files to be. All right, I'm going to do some software here in a minute because I like the frame generator. It has a property panel, like we've seen with the other tools that I was showing. They've got the new property panel that's part of that. And frame generator now has a property panel that's part of it. They've also updated the reuse command. The reuse command in the past I had to pick on the original member to reuse it. So if I had a whole bunch of tube and I was using this, these square tubes running across here, and I'm like, oh, I'll just use another one of those. Who knows which one of those was the original? I have to really dig for it. Well, now I can pick on any of those and reuse them. So I'm just going to point out a couple of quick things about just how this works. It's much smoother, it's much more responsive, and just a little bit easier to use. So I'm going to jump up my inventor here. I think I am. There we go. So this is I'll bring this. This is just a little shell that I've created, and I'm going to use it as a frame. And I'll throw this out here. If you are not using extrusions to generate frames, I will suggest it. It's a great way to leverage. Instead of having to draw each one of the sketches out, I just have an extrusion, and I'm basing some of the information just off that extrusion then. So we'll go ahead and just drop this here like I typically would. And I'll go ahead and save that. I'll just give it the same name, that's fine. So went too quick there because it actually had a thing that said how many files are we saving and what are we doing, and I jumped by it. A couple of quick things before I jump into frame gen. I mentioned these a little bit, but if I take a look at my application options, it's under colors where you can change that from the dark theme to the light theme. So I'm going to the dark theme is where I'm at, especially for the purposes of this. The other thing I'll point out, I'll just jump back to this. While I'm here, I mentioned all these tools, delete face now has a property palette and some other things. One thing that surprises me, at least it did when I first got into it, fillet still looks the same way, and you'll notice it's not affected by the theme that I have. I've got my dark theme, and fillet and chamfer, nope. They look exactly the same. Shell does too, and that kind of surprised me. Going on a tangent here for a minute. Man, I use those all the time. Those whole fillet chamfer, those are D2 Inventor class type of things. It's what we talk about all the time. And one thing I'll say is that Autodesk has been working, particularly if the extrude tool, they've added new options to this. It's not just a switch it over to a different panel. They've taken the time to actually update the command as well. So I think we're going to see that in the future where there's going to be different new options with the different options with chamfer. Total wild guess here. I've got absolutely nothing to go on other than just what I've seen with the other tools. But that is my guess why those aren't there, because it did kind of surprise me when I first picked on it and that old dialog box popped up. I'm going to go over to frame gen, and I'll go ahead and go in here to my generator. I bring this up, and I'll just go with a square tube, 2x2. Yeah, it's fine. I'll just put in some simple square tube. So a couple of things I'll point out about this. First of all, we can see here, it really depends on how your lines are drawn in terms of which direction your frame is going. Everybody's experienced that sometimes. Oh, I didn't realize it was going to go that way. Now I get a couple of things. I get a profile of what I'm going to be working with, and it shows me what it's going to consider the start point. And as I move around this midpoint here, you can see it switch back and forth, but I'll go ahead and place that one there. So I've got a start point and an end point for it. And this is just some feedback we just literally didn't have before. What was a start point, what was an end point. Actually, I don't want to use that one. I apologize. I'm going to cut back in because I'll just reuse that. I was just figuring out that start point and end point thing. So I'll say, okay, yeah, let's go with that. That sounds great. Put one across the top and one here in the middle, sure. And I'll say, okay. So my naming, you notice I've got frame and it's got this name that comes out here and it goes on. It says a skeleton and it's got a similar name, but it's got an 80 instead of 79. I'll just point this out real quick. I'm just going to accept my defaults for that. And I have, again, back here under my application options, where I go to my file naming, I've got all these file naming defaults now. So I can understand if I've got a file, what do I want my frame assembly to be called? And I can come in and add things into this, such as file name, the project name. If when I put in an end cap, Do I want just the content center display name, or do I want the manufacturer as well, or do I want a part number associated to it? A frame component itself, how do I want it named? Do I want other information in there? Do I want a project standards, stock number? Again, on and on. I can call all of this out. And as I mentioned earlier, that's also true of tube and pipe. And wow, if you're not familiar with tube and pipe, this just looks crazy. But these are all the types of things and components and pieces that are created when we do a tube and pipe run. And before it was just like, hey, run 01. Good luck, you know, and route 01. Now I can come in and be putting index numbers associated to them. I can associate the file name to them so that I've got uniquely named tube and pipe runs. And then the mirror copy, you'll notice very, very similar. I can include things as well as in mirror and copy, the day, the month, and the year if I wanted to. So I could tag exactly when that was copied, link to an assembly, and so on. But that's what I wanted to show. It's down here under my file naming defaults. When I get into creating these components, that's where that's coming from. Looking at my frame information, I'll just go ahead and do a couple of quick additions to this. So I've got reuse, and reuse again, we got a property palette here. I think this has become much simpler. I think it's become much simpler to understand. I'll just pick this and say, and I want it to go over here. And you'll notice I get that same glyph that I had before. So it's clear to me which side of that, you know, where it's going, how it's putting in, what it's considering, the top and the front and the back. It's just much easier to use. Now, I actually got out of that command, and that's typical Inventor. That's very much how I think of using the tools. But I want to put another one over here. This is what I was mentioning earlier. I don't have to go back and pick this one. I can pick any of those. And notice that it jumped there all the way back to my original. So basically, they've taken it off of you to have to worry about reusing the original. You can pick on any in the set and it knows, oh, yeah, I got that. It's right over here. So now I can come in and place in my others as well. Right, so I just do those adjustments. If there are any treatments on this, they would go right along with it. It takes the treatments along. It takes all of that information as I go in and reuse that. I can even go so far as to window select things. So I could begin window selecting and pulling all of that so that it's easier for me to grab that information that I want to reuse as part of that. And now what we have within the browser is that series of those, right? So this isn't really a subassembly. It's really a folder that's in here. But take that, put it into a folder without me even realizing I had to worry about it, and it now contains it, so I've got my information in there. So I really like how that works. I think that was a good addition to that. It was sometimes very difficult to pick out exactly what we were doing, you know, looking at a particular model, looking at all of that. So I like how the frame generator, it's been updated so that we can select that information, and I like how reuse has been updated quite a bit. Frame generator, between the renaming and how we can reuse those tools, I think has been a great addition to this. One other thing I want to point out, I mentioned that the idea of the frame gen that I had just a second ago. One thing that we can concern ourselves with now, and bold connection still has this older style dialog box, but I can turn on or turn off the subassembly structure. So if you have a bolted connection, it always put in a subassembly and put the components in a subassembly. By default, that's turned off now, and it will put it in a folder with those components. We'll end up with those individual components, but we won't have the subassembly like we used to in previous versions of that. So it's a minor change, but just one less file to keep track of, one less thing to concern yourself with when you're looking at that information. So frame generator, property panel, reuse command has really been enhanced. I like what they've done there, so that I can select that a lot easier. So that's a big one for me with the way the frame works. This one is kind of huge. We now have AnyCAD that works with Revit. So back in the old days, everybody just used AutoCAD, and it was super easy to share our drawings. You just sent someone an AutoCAD file. And then as these differing softwares came out, and the different abilities and the different specializations, everyone got dialed into using one, and it became, of course, harder and harder to do this. So at some point, you know, a lot of times these things are going to matter. I may need to, if I'm working with someone and I say, yeah, I'm going to build a unit that's going to go onto your building. We've got a heating and cooling unit that's going to go in there. I need reference points from Revit so that I know how we need to locate this. Or looking at it the other way, a lot of times instead of a heating cooling unit, we've got whether it would be some sort of curtain wall structure that still we're designing in Revit, but ultimately needs to go into an architectural component. Either way, we need to reference those. So now we can bring in a Revit project with AnyCAD. I see my mistakes now. It made perfect sense when I did this earlier. I said Inventor can reference a specific 3D view is what I want to have there, not just specific 3D. So we can bring in a specific 3D view. Only the objects visible in the view will be loaded into Inventor. And that is really important. A lot of times I may be building an awning or one curtain wall or a transaction window for a bank or something like that. I am not concerned with the HVAC. I'm not concerned with any of that. I just need this area so that I can pull in begin working with the transaction view. So this would require some communication with the Revit user to say, hey, I need this portion of it, I need this information, and I want to bring that, that's what I need to reference. And then they can create a view for you. You cannot create these views in Inventor, the 3D views. They're very specific to Revit, and that's where they get created. So that's one of those tools. Well, it's one of the tools that allow us to use that, but we're going to need a lot of communication to be able to use that pretty well and be able to discuss that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go get my Revit. I've got a Revit file, and I'm going to go grab my Revit file, and I'm going to bring my Revit file in. So this is just file open, just like I would with anything else. And just like I can select Pro-E files, or I can go select CATIA files or SOLIDWORKS files, I can select a Revit file. So that's one of the options that I have. And when I do, it's giving me a warning that it's an earlier version of Revit. That's fine. We'll say go ahead. It's not really going to take too long here. So it's taking a look at this project. And AnyCAD, if you haven't used it, the big trick here is I'm going to reference this model. I'm not going to convert this model. So this is going to be a link to the model that I have. And if the initial model changes and I get an update, I can bring it into here and I can use that information as part of this. So it's going to take a look at this whole Revit model. It's taking a look at the view list, look at all the things. And here in a moment, I'll get a list of the 3 views that are available, and then I can choose from that. So in this case, this is a fairly small project. So one of the things that we'll see is I really am going to load everything into here. I'm just kind of grabbing everything and pull all that in. Typically, you would get one that has a smaller subset. So here's my whole, my general overview. Here's the preview that's just the kitchen. Here's a preview that's just the living room. All right, so I've got these different views in here. I'm just going to do this one called approach. Now it's going to yell at me here in a minute. I've got 539 elements in my preview. And you'll notice as I go through some of these different ones, 540, most of this is just kind of generally everything, right? It's a small enough model. I'm really looking at everything. Nothing is turned off. I'm going to go ahead and just say, okay, grab that. It tells me, hey, this is pretty big. It'll take a minute. You notice it doesn't really take too long at all. But the idea is that a Revit user could take that model and essentially simplify it. Really, they're just turning things off on their end and then generate a view for you that is really straightforward and has only the information that you need to see for your particular project. So in this case, I'm going to bring this in. And one thing we'll talk about in a minute is just Inventor performance in general and some of the areas they've worked on. And it kind of surprises me, having used Revit in the past and knowing the complexity of some of these tools and what we can get into, how smooth this is once all this loads up, because we can move around, we can work with this. I mean, here I've got my whole plan, I've got everything in here, and it's just surprising to me how quickly we can begin moving around and working with this. In my case, maybe I'm building a, we've got, I'm going to build a security screen that's going to go over top of the skylight that's been placed into here. The crazy thing is I can work on this just as if it were an Inventor part. I can come in, say, hey, I'm going to start creating some components. I'm going to start a sketch. Actually, I'm going to go back here. I'm going to start a sketch on this, and I can begin leveraging the information that's there on this existing model, building my sketch, extruding, name it. I can project this geometry here and use that as a basis for what I'm going to begin extruding and working with. So I can start my security screen, say, all right, sounds good. And I've got Inventor components linked directly to my Revit model. Of course, I could go through and filter this out and do whatever I need as part of that. The one thing I'll point out is this does have everything in here, so I can come in and control, turn off the visibility of all my doors in the model, turn off the visibility of whatever. So I have control over what I want to see once we've gotten to this point, but I can't create my own separate view like they can within Revit, where it's a simplified version of that. I'm literally just turning off what's visible and what's not visible. So, well, you know what? I don't need this topography information, that's for sure. I can do anything with that. So now I can simplify my model, simplify my view, and build off of it, right? So right on the line, it's amazing what comes in, what level we see this information at, and the fact that I can leverage that going forward. Something I've been looking for a long time. I think it's a great way it's a great way that we can use to edit this information here. So very, very cool. That's probably one of the big wins for me, was the way that FrameGen works now and the fact that we have that AnyCAD that's in there. Oh, another big one. Gotta keep my eye on the time. So sheet layouts and sheets, there are two big things with the sheets in general. One is the sheet layouts that we have that are part of that. And if you haven't used sheet layouts, it's basically a way of setting up which views you want on a sheet beforehand. I can say, I always like to have these 3 views on a sheet of this size. That's a sheet layout. You can also include within there, we can include bills of materials, general tables, and notes can be included with that. We can also save, if we have a sheet metal flat pattern, that can be saved with the sheet layout. Now, these have been around for a long time. Sheet layouts have been around forever. So if you're an old Inventor user, you're like, yeah, I remember those, but I never really used them because you had to create a new drawing and then you had to activate a sheet layout. It worked, but it wasn't something that was a clear workflow. It wasn't a workflow that was, absolutely, everyone understood immediately. So now, when I create a drawing, I'll go in here and create a drawing, I get an extra window. And I can see these are the sheet layouts available to me within there. So not only do I have a template, within that template, I've got various sheet layouts that I'm going to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and select one here. And say, yeah, let's go ahead and let's get this C size. So let's go ahead and create it off of that. And it says, well, that's fine. What document do you want to use as part of that? So now I can go along and select which file I want to use in there. And it automatically generates the file for me with views in place, including any information that I want as standard notes that are part of that. Again, sheet layout. These have been here in our drawing resources all along. I can create sheet layouts, but it's really nice now how I can very easily say, well, I'm creating a new one. I'm using this, grab this part, and away it goes. So I'll just grab the same part another way. The other thing, I had it on the slide, I didn't mention it, is I can use this. I'll just grab this one. So different sheet layout, different information, puts it in there. I've even got a bill of materials in here. It's calling out some info. So what a great tool. What a great way to begin setting this up. So the thing that I would say about this is just so much easier to use now. Sheet layouts have been around for a while. I had on my slide I can now set it up. If I go to save a sheet layout, I can save any sheet as a sheet layout. I'll say create a sheet format, excuse me. Create a sheet format. I can tell it to fit views to the sheet. So the next time, if I brought in a model that was much larger, it would automatically scale it to fit the sheet. Now, anytime you hear the word automatic, when it comes to software, it's 80%, right? So there's going to be some adjustments, some moving. This was longer than other components, so it overlapped my prints and everything. Excuse me, my notes. So, but what a great way to do that. And this is, again, nothing you have to do, nothing you have to turn on. It's just when I go to look at drawing, all of the sheet formats that are available, they include the size, whatever views, whatever text I have on there. Those sheet formats are automatically ready for me. You just can select one and use it. It's a great tool. It's a great enhancement to tools we've already had. I really like the way that that's going to work. Okay, I'm going to jump back to my PowerPoint just for a second. So sheet layouts, flat patterns can be saved with them. The view can scale automatically. They're there and ready to use. It's a great addition to that. So that's the drawing information updates. And right along with this, if you do any type of automation at all, it becomes important. iLogic has some more tools to support drawing automation. You can add dimensions, holds, balloons. This is all done to labeled features, but this extends what we've seen in the past. There's iLogic rules that we can have in here where we can generate drawings, generate views. It gives us access to that. So you could do this before with kind of some API calls if you were familiar with that. Now it's more in line with what we've seen with iLogic with other features where we can easily get to this. It's got some snippets of code. It's kind of got some built-in rules where we can go begin working with that. So drawing automation has been a big push that we've seen. This can obviously get pretty deep pretty quick with everything we're looking at, but I do want to show just an example of creating some drawings and a couple of pieces with iLogic and with this type of automation that we have. So I'm going to jump back here to my Inventor and I'll open up an assembly. And I have within here, I'll just turn on my iLogic browser, I've got the configuration form. And this is what we would think of a lot of times with if I'm building something like this, and I've got some options. I'll say, I want it to be a 3-tier, I want the small size, and that sounds good. We'll just make the touch clear. If I can, no, I just need to slide it down. And I'll say, okay, go ahead and do that. So to go through, here's my adjustments. This is iLogic type of thing that we've seen in the past where we can have those multiple tiers and work with all of that. It's very common. This is what I think is amazing. This, with the iLogic automation that we have now, we can link all of this together. In this case, I've got my drawing that's going to update and adjust along with it. And I can even go further and say, okay, it's nice that we've automatically updated the drawing with it, but I need component drawings. And do I want them to be separate drawing files, or do I just want them to be sheets in the drawing that I'm working with now? And then I want how do I want what I want to do here? And I'm going to say, yeah, let's do these as sheets as part of this. So now the iLogic tool that we have has gone through and added every component that I have in there using sheet formats, like we saw just a moment ago. It's added them all as sheets in there, and I can now begin detailing them out. You notice that I've got the option. Do I want to do separate drawing files, or do I want to do sheets in this drawing? So, I went through, grabbed each piece that I had, every component, including every single tube. But now I've got it all where I can call it out. And within iLogic, if I take a look at my rules, of course, there's my forms. I'll just create a new rule. You can see that I've got all of the different information. I can capture current states right off the different views. I can go get all of that. And then I've got a new tab over here in my snippets for this information where I can say, well, if I want to worry about a diameter dimension, it puts in all the variables, declares them for me, calls them out, and gives me some information where I can generate dimensions, general dimensions off of something. Now, it does do it, if we're doing dimensions, it's going to do it off of named features. So this won't just throw all the dimensions on your drawing. It doesn't understand that. It does do it off of named features. This level of automation with drawings is a big step forward, and it seems like we could get almost as far as we wanted to with iLogic, with individual, I could take an assembly and I could update it and change all of that, but now we want to move forward and be able to work with the drawings as well. So it's a great addition to working with that. In general, and this is something that you'll see just calls out performance improvements. I haven't seen any real metrics on this where it's 5%, 100% better, anything like that. But it just feels, and I hate to use that word, but as you're moving through, you saw that large Revit model that I had and just how smooth that was to go through and view that. All of these different areas, they've really improved the general performance of. And Frame Generator in particular stands out to me. It feels much more fluid. I heard a description of a video game the other day where they said the user feels heavy, when you're playing, and I'm like, wow, that's perfect. That's exactly right. That's how Frame Generator felt. It felt heavy. And as I look at this, it does. It feels much lighter. And that's the only way I could think to describe it, but just the way that it moves through. So this is where you can see a lot of focus has been put on this. And I think this is important. I go back quite a few years with this. And I remember when Inventor first came out, people were building 10-part assemblies, and it was the coolest thing ever. And it seemed like 5 minutes later, they're like, well, I've got a 5,000-part assembly. Why is this so slow? I feel like users, we have always outpaced the software. So that makes sense that so much of this has been put into performance, because the envelope always gets pushed by the users. As soon as we can do a 1,000-part assembly, we try to do a 10,000-part assembly and on down the line. Oh, perfect. Keeping right on my time track. I like it. So that's kind of the big broad overview with Inventor. And honestly, the AnyCAD is a big deal for me, Frame Gen, and then there's all those things in the background. And Vault kind of does it the same way. Well, there's a few key pieces that stand out with Vault. This really, again, Vault's becoming much more of a mature product. We're seeing a lot of strength in how the tool works. And some of the things they're adding are very much iterations or enhancements to what we already have. This is also an admin heavy release. So for the end user, which is whom I assume I'm talking to end users on this particular call, there's not a whole lot for end users. It's much more for the idea of working on the admin side, and I'll point some of that out. But duplicate search, this was a point release of Vault 2020. The idea of duplicate search, and we can always search within Vault for file names. We can always search in Vault for particular properties, but duplicate search does a geometric search for duplicate property. So the example I use, and I've seen again and again, is a company might have 8 versions of the same bracket because you can't find it, so you just create another one because it's simple and it gets a new name, and there it is. And if you look at your assemblies, maybe it even has the same part number, and you realize, oh, I've got this thing in here all these different times. Well, a lot of times that's not easy to find. Or maybe you've done a large data load and you've got content center parts from many iterations, and you realize, oh, these are all pointing to the wrong thing, but it's difficult to locate that. What the duplicate search does is it can go through your Vault and look for duplicate geometry, and then we can see it in a report format. There's a dashboard that'll tell us what's there, and it gives you an idea of what can be replaced, what do we want to get rid of. A lot of those decisions are still yours, but it can go through, find, and help you replace that geometry as you go through and do that. Again, I think this is part of a webcast I did a while back, the idea of getting deep into this and doing the duplicate search. But I just do want to point out that, yeah, it's a great tool to be able to find that information. Just like we have Revit AnyCAD for Inventor, right along with that, it's supported by Vault. So if I check a Inventor file into Vault that has a Revit file attached to it, it will also be checked in. So it understands those links between them. And then this also works if we attach something with BIM 360. We can have those links. It understands how those go together. So this is BIM 360 is a cloud-based storage application. It specifically works with with Revit and with similar tools like that. It can really be used for any file, but it can link to Vault as well. So we can check that in with BIM 360, and those will link together. So those are two of the big kind of user ones. On the admin side, we can change the Vault status bar when the admin is logged on. They updated the job queue. Instead of 1,000 entries in the job queue, it can now have 10,000 entries, and that's an option you can turn on or turn off. The big one for me is the idea of a download permission. So typically, we can add, say, to users, we're looking at a particular file, we can say users can view the files, they could modify the files, or they can delete the files. But if a user gets into Vault, if they can look at a file, they can get a copy of it. There may be instances we don't want them to do that. We want them to just be able to see the file, but view it within the viewer within Vault, but not be able to download a copy of it. Well, now we have a new permission called download that we can say user A and user B are allowed to download it, but user C, he can look at it and not download it. Or she's allowed, into this folder, but not allowed to, and can only read the information, can't modify it, and also cannot download it. So it's a very useful addition. This is something that I've had clients ask me for in the past. They're like, well, if they are, read-only document consumers, can they still download a file? The answer's always been yes. But now we can take document consumers and we have this download permission that we can adjust so that they cannot.